how symmetrical are you? What do I mean by that? How well do you use your right hand versus how well do you use your left hand? How well do you bear your weight through your right leg versus your left leg? Is it even? Do you list to one side? Are you always reaching with your right hand for objects? There's a lot of ways to look at symmetry and to appreciate symmetry. And I definitely think from a clinical standpoint, I definitely strongly feel that the less symmetrical you are in terms of your weight bearing, in terms of your coordination, the more trouble you can get into, orthopedically speaking, in terms of injuries, in terms of chronic pain. The list goes on and on. And the research base for this is super tricky because it's very hard to define. But I thought I would take a hack at this and talk about symmetry from a clinical orthopedic standpoint. And in order to understand symmetry, I think the first step to take with this is I'm going to talk to you guys about three things that you should know about symmetry right off the bat, that influence how your body moves right from the get-go, right from birth, really. And if you know these three things, it's going to start to pave the path for you to actually improve yourself. And what do I mean by improve yourself? I mean, make yourself a better athlete, for example. If you look at any high-level athletes, take basketball. If they can cut to the left and if they can cut to the right, use their left leg, their right leg, if their left hand is as coordinated as their right hand, if they're ambidextrous, that's another word that we see. If you have those skills, you're a better athlete. And if we take a few steps down the ladder, let's talk about like just an average Joe who has a knee replacement. If someone comes in and is having a knee replacement on their right side, I often ask myself, was this preventable? Is this due to decades and decades of just being grossly asymmetric? We're going to take a deep look into that. So let's start by taking a look at the three things that I'm going to describe to you that influence your symmetry right from the get-go and what maybe you can do to change it. The first thing that you should know about body symmetry, let's take a look at an anatomical skeleton here. If you check it out, you got to ask yourself, is this skeleton symmetrical? I mean, if you drew a line right down the middle, is there going to be a left side and a right side that's basically superimposable or foldable on itself? To the layperson and to any observer for that matter, yes. The left side and the right side look essentially like mirror images of one another. So what does this tell me as a PT and a clinician? We are at least developmentally based human beings that are meant to bear our weight through both our left and our right sides. Symmetrically, I would argue. But as we all know, this doesn't always happen. Let's take this a step further. Is everything in your body symmetrical? The answer is not really. And I'll cite one main difference here. The placement of many of your organs are not symmetrical. So the liver, for example, is not centered on your midline. One big thing that we see is the lungs. The right lung has 3 lobes. The left lung has 2 lobes. There's a little difference in the width as well. And because of that, the breathing muscle that lies underneath your rib cage, underneath your lungs, the diaphragm, that's not symmetrical either along the midline or the mid-axis per se. So when we breathe, there is going to be perhaps a little bit of asymmetry in our breathing. And the question is, does this organ placement and this lung placement have an effect, a bigger effect on our posture and how we bear weight? Well, I've got a really super cool study that when I read it, I felt like my brain exploded. These people deserve the Nobel Prize for this. And let's discuss this because it's very pertinent to this subject. So these researchers theorized or suggest that in the general population that we see, people are just a little bit rotated to their right. And they feel that the rationale for this is because of the organ placement and the lungs and the diaphragm, etc. Interesting theory. So not a lot rotated to the right. You can see from the research here, a couple of degrees. So how did they go about trying to test this? This is freaking brilliant what they did. There is a phenomenon called status inversus, which basically is a very, very small percentage of the population in the world are born with their organs flipped about the central axis, meaning you and I, our hearts are perhaps a little bit displaced to the left, and the lung thing that we just talked about, 3 lobes on the right, 2 lobes on the left. In a fraction of 1% of the population, this is the opposite. How cool is that? So, what do these researchers decide to do, which is so cool, is that they chase down these people and they are documented. If, once in a while a doctor will find one of these people, they did MRIs of the spines of these people and compared it to the general population. And guess what? These people had a slight amount of rotation to the left, whereas everybody else in the universe is slightly rotated to the right. So, super neat study. It's not a randomized control trial, it's not a systematic review, but man, am I convinced. I am so convinced that I have taken this information to heart. If a patient comes in and I'm evaluating them for spinal pain and I'm watching them stand and looking at their alignment, if they are just a teensy bit turned to the right, I don't freak out because I believe that this phenomenon in terms of the organ placement slightly biases us towards the right. How cool is that? So, first thing we need to know, 99 point whatever percent of us are slightly predisposed to be rotated a little bit to the right. All right, ladies and gents, point number 2, brain lateralization, or a more layperson terminology for this is side dominance. There's definitely some literature that talks about side dominance. And what I mean by side dominance and brain lateralization is it's pretty normal for us to be born predisposed to be either right-handed or left-handed. And people, like I said, people have done research on this. In 2017, some European scientists, I believe, actually found some decently convincing etiology that the precursor to what makes us right-handed or left-handed is actually in our fetal spinal cord developmentally. But basic information that you and I need to know is that about, depending on what you read, about 87% of the population is born right-handed and 13% of the population is born left-handed. Way back in the day, there was a thing called the hand dominance questionnaire, which asked a series of questions. I believe it was like 13 to 15 questions, asking what hand do you use a hammer with? What hand do you throw a ball with? What hand do you write with? This type of thing. It probably needs an update because I think people's skill sets have changed. It should ask now maybe like what hand do you swipe with, or that type of thing, if you get what I'm saying. And what we will see clinically in the PT clinic, and if you check out the evidence-based research, it kind of leans this way, not super strongly, but if you're right-handed, you can reasonably expect to have a little bit more grip strength on the right hand, and you're going to have more coordination, obviously, because it has to do with your wiring and how you do purposeful movements. Lefties, on the other hand, you will find that there's less of a strength differential in grip strength between the left and the right side. But the left grip, mind you, most of the time is not stronger than the right grip. So righties tend to be stronger with grip with their right hand, whereas lefties, it's a little bit less defined. And there may be a really good reason for this environmentally speaking, and we'll get into that in a while. So a secondary point about point number 2 here is, just as we have dominance in our upper extremities, we also have dominance in our lower extremities. And if you think about this, either one of these, either the upper extremities or the lower extremities, can mess you up if you are too asymmetrical. The confusing thing about the lower extremity is it's much harder to define in terms of what constitutes leg dominance. There's a systematic review that I will put here on the screen that basically says that there's not enough information, or they don't know how to operationally define leg dominance. For the upper extremities, we can define upper extremity or hand dominance. You can basically boil it down to one question: what hand do you write with? I know that doesn't give the entire picture, but it gives a basic picture. With the legs, it's a little trickier. I've seen studies where they have decided to operationally define leg dominance as the leg that you use to kick a ball, which sort of makes sense. But because we bear weight through our legs, there's a little more to the story. So if you're kicking a soccer ball, you need the coordination in your right leg. Let's say arbitrarily that you're kicking a soccer ball with your right leg. If you're kicking a soccer ball with your right leg, your left leg has to stabilize your entire weight through it, or you're going to fall on your ass. So, in the lower extremities, because they're weight bearing, there is there are, I should say, hints out there in some studies, which I'm going to talk to you guys about, that suggest that maybe there are two types of dominance in the lower extremity. There's coordination based dominance, meaning like which leg do you kick a ball with? And then there's also stability based dominance. And by stability based dominance, I mean like which leg is like your go to leg. If you had to get up out of a chair and you could only use one leg to power you up, would you do it? Which leg would you do it with? And would it be the same leg as the leg that you kick? That's a good question. You can see that this kind of plagues me as a clinician, because I've seen, not to go too deep into the subject because this can be an entire other 20-minute discussion. I see people who come into the clinic all the time that have repetitive use injuries in their legs, where they are just so dominant on one side that it's like their other leg is just, it's crap. It's almost as if they've had a stroke, and their left leg is, it's not useless, but it's not strong, it's not coordinated. So I do think that these two types of dominance for the legs, the coordination and the stability, sometimes they both get pushed to one side, and that, my friend, in my opinion as a clinician, is a huge problem. So more on that later. All right, point number 3: time flies when you're having fun, at least for me. So point number 3 are environmental influences. So, from the first point, we may be a little bit rotated to the right. For our second point, there's brain lateralization and there's side dominance, clearly. Point number 3 is that these things can get compounded or mucked up by our environment. So, what do I mean by that? I mean that the world is basically made for right handed people. And this does two things. For right handed people, it reinforces their right side. So there are dozens and dozens of examples of what I mean by this, and I'll just outline a few. Number one, for example, like today I was riding my bike home from work. Bicycle gears are on the right side of your handlebars, or on the right handlebar, I guess I should say. So you had better be able to use your bike gears operating with your right hand, or you're going to crash. So for righties, this is reinforcing the neural pathways to their right hand, their coordination, their fine motor skills. What about lefties? Well, what I found is that I'm left-handed, as evidenced by me holding this mic with my left hand. Ooh, there you go. I learned pretty quickly as a child how to operate things with my right hand. Water fountains. I remember in grade school going up, and the water fountains had to press with your right hand. Uh, Scissors. I learned how to cut with my right hand because I believe in the elementary school class that I was in, there was one pair of lefty scissors, and they were either broken or the other lefty kid in the classroom was using them, and I didn't. So I just sucked it up and I learned. So, countless examples in terms of how lefties have to maybe develop a little more coordination with their right side, and righties have to, or are forced, I should say, to perpetuate the neurological development of their right side, and it becomes stronger and stronger. So maybe that left side just becomes less and less used over time. Now, is this also true in the lower extremity? Sure. We learn sports a certain way when we're kids. We drive cars. We are learned to operate the gas pedal and the brakes with our right foot. Gone are the days of people who kick back in their car and operate the brake with their left foot and the accelerator with their right foot. I know some people from older generations that do that, but that's been proven to be kind of dangerous. So nobody is really taught to use or how to operate a car with their left foot. It's not safe. So lefties have to suck it up and have to learn how to coordinate on the right side. And maybe that's a benefit to them long term because they're learning some coordination on their side that perhaps isn't as coordinated. So take all this stuff, take all the environmental stuff, and throw it in the blender and hit puree because each of us are a case study unto ourselves. You should be starting to ask yourself, am I righty? Am I lefty? What about my arms? What about my legs? What do I do that perpetuates the usage of one side? I'll finish with this one little anecdote, which is super cool. We did talk about athleticism before. There was an NFL football player, which I will put the article up here. I don't believe he's still playing, but he was a receiver, Odell Beckham, and the article that you can see here was basically an homage to his skills. And this guy was highly skilled, highly ambidextrous, and he swears, and I kind of agree with him, that he facilitated the coordination on his non-dominant side, his left hand, by forcing himself to do all sorts of functional daily things with his left hand. Brush his teeth, you name it. You can check out the article, you can find it online easily. He forced himself to do lots of stuff with his left hand, and he credits some of that to his high level of skills. So athleticism, if you want to be if you want to be a top level athlete, you should consider training your non-dominant side in terms of your arms or hands. That's not that hard to do. With the legs, we're going to have a whole other lecture presentation about how you can actually identify your side dominance in your legs because like I said it's a little bit tricky, and more importantly what you can start to do to get the ball rolling to improve that. And my last point here is not only does this improve your athleticism, I am convinced that this is good for your long-term orthopedic health. If your legs are more symmetrical and you stand more symmetrically and you move more symmetrically, you're not going to be dumping all your weight on one side your whole life. And maybe that causes back pain. The spine, I can tell you for sure, does not like asymmetry, does not like us totally leaned over to one side all of the time. It just is not conducive to back health. And in terms of joints that wear down, your knees, your hips, who knows? We've just scratched the surface. I don't think there's any data out there that really takes a good hard look at how people injure themselves, both anecdotally, meaning like you're skiing down the ski slope and you fall down, you do what's called a yard sale. Does asymmetry affect how you fall? Did you fall because you're asymmetrical? And long term, are you having that joint replacement on your right knee because you dumped 70% of your weight through your right side for the last 60 years? Awesome questions. Start thinking about it. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them. I'm going to be talking about this quite a bit because I find it's a really interesting clinical phenomenon in terms of outpatient orthopedics. And the more you know about it, I think the healthier you're going to be and the more athletic you're going to be. Drop us a comment, subscribe, hit the bell, do all that fun stuff. If you liked watching this episode lecture, tell a friend. Thanks again. Thanks for watching the Angry Physio.